What's up, guys? It's MB Boxing, and today I'm going to be doing my preview for the main event this Saturday between Anthony Joshua and Robert Helenius. And this is going to be a 12-rounder in the heavyweight division. And as most of you guys know, this fight is going to be Saturday, August 12th from the O2 Arena in London, England, and this fight is now going to be broadcasted just on DAZN, not as pay-per-view. But again, both fighters' resumes, Anthony Joshua, very well known. He holds a record of 25 wins, 3 losses, with 22 wins coming by way of knockout. He is a 2012 Olympic gold medalist, winning obviously in the London Summer Games in his home country. And Joshua is also a former two-time unified WBA, WBO, and IBF heavyweight world champion and is currently ranked number 3 by BoxRec in the heavyweight division. To get into all of his losses and his best wins, he has lost by split decision and unanimous decision to Alexander Usyk, and he also has a TKO loss in 2019 to Andy Ruiz, which was the upset of the year for 2019, and that was in their first fight. But to get into some of his best victories, he's defeated Kubrat Pulev by KO. He's defeated Charles Martin by KO. He's defeated Andy Ruiz by unanimous decision in their rematch, won easily. He also defeated Alexander Povetkin by TKO, defeated Joseph Parker by unanimous decision, defeated Vladimir Klitschko, the heavyweight legend, by TKO in an all-out war in 2017, and he also defeated Dillian Whyte by TKO. And that was in their first fight. So, Anthony Joshua, I mean, nowadays he's been sort of looked down upon, especially since the Ruiz loss and the Usyk losses. And he also, I forgot to mention, in his last fight, he did defeat Jermaine Franklin by unanimous decision. It wasn't a bad performance by him. It just wasn't what we were used to seeing of Joshua back in the day when he would fight like C-level opposition. Jermaine Franklin, I know he's given Dillian Whyte a tough fight and gave Joshua not that bad of a fight either. It's just that, I mean, when you look at his wins compared to a lot of other guys in the heavyweight division, it's not that solid. So obviously, when it was like Joshua in like 2016, 2017, 2018, he was just knocking guys out at will. His record was like 20-0 with like 20 knockouts, or 19-0 with 19 knockouts, something like that. Like, it was crazy like that. But obviously nowadays he's switched his trainer. Now with Derek James, he's been fighting a bit more defensively since that first Ruiz fight, and we saw that against Jermaine Franklin where he was just trying to pick his shots as opposed to going out there and going for the KO. But to get his opponent's resume, Robert Helenius is fighting out of Finland. He holds a record of 32 wins, 4 losses, with 21 wins coming by way of knockout. He is currently ranked number 24 by BoxRec in the heavyweight division. I think he should be ranked higher. I think he's around a top 15 level. But yeah, he's ranked number 24 on BoxRec currently, and he's also the former European heavyweight champion. And to get into his losses and his best wins, he has a brutal KO loss to Deontay Wilder in his second to last fight. He also does have a KO loss to Gerald Washington. And that Washington fight, I heard some stuff around how Helenius had the flu in that one. I really think that loss doesn't matter too much because I think Helenius is significantly better than Gerald Washington. And I think if they were to fight now or even 2 years ago, I think Helenius would have knocked him out. And it was his first fight in the U.S. as well, but I definitely think that Washington lost. He's definitely better than Washington. And then he also does have a unanimous decision defeat to Dillian Whyte, and that was when he stepped in on short notice, and he actually was able to rock Whyte a bit and give him a decent fight. And he also has a knockout loss to Johan Duhaupas, but that was around 7 years ago. But to get into his best victories, he has defeated Adam Kovnatsky by TKO twice. In their first fight, it was my upset of the year for 2020, won by TKO in round 4, and it was a pretty competitive fight up until the stoppage. Then in the second fight, Helenius absolutely dominated Kovnatsky and really put an end to his reign as a top 10 contender by just brutalizing him, dominated him, made his eyes swell, and got the stoppage in the 6th round. Another one of Helenius' best wins is Erkan Tepper, who he did brutally knock out later on in the fight. I believe it was in the 8th or 9th round. And then to get some of his best wins sort of earlier on in his career, he defeated Derek Chisora by split decision in a somewhat controversial fight. He also defeated Sergey Liakovic, a former world champion, by TKO. Another former world champion he defeated was Sam Peter by brutal knockout. And yet another champion he knocked out was Lamont Brewster by KO. And in his most recent fight, Helenius fought this past Saturday on August 5th and knocked out 6-0, 6 knockout Mika Miolonen in a castle. So he stepped into this fight against Joshua on very short notice. On Saturday, last Saturday, when the Jake Paul fight happened on August 5th, Dillian White did test positive for, I don't know exactly what it was, but I think it was some type of PED, I'm pretty sure. But, I mean, he still tested positive for something that's wrong. So, obviously, I mean, he has to be pulled out of the fight justifiably by not testing clean. So, Robert Helenius steps in after some negotiations. Some people thought it was going to be Derek Chisora. Some thought Hrgovic. Some thought Ruiz. Some thought all these other guys. But, I mean, I know there's a lot of people online saying that, I wish it was Hrgovic, or I wish it was Ruiz. I mean, I'm just going to give some reasons why it's definitely not those two. One, I mean, Hrgovic has been training his entire camp to fight a southpaw in Dempsey McKean for his mandatory spot, and I don't think he'd want to risk giving up that title shot and changing a whole opponent style in fighting Joshua on a week's notice. And for Andy Ruiz, I mean, one, I don't think Ruiz is in shape because Helenius is in shape. He just fought on Saturday. Two, Ruiz probably asked for an astronomical amount of money, I would assume, if he's just begging for a rematch. I mean, he was begging for the third fight even after they had their rematch where Joshua won easy. So, I mean, Ruiz, I mean, he's always known for having hard negotiations, like when he was in talks of fighting Deontay Wilder a few months ago. Obviously, that's still in talks, but it was getting deeper, and more news was going out about it a few months ago, and Ruiz, and everyone was just talking about how Ruiz just wasn't making the fight happen, how his team was giving trouble. So, I mean, that could definitely be a factor as well. But also, it's a pretty short notice fight for such a high level of opponent. I mean, Andy Ruiz, like I said before, he's not in shape, but I mean, obviously there's going to have to be some type of build-up for that. And I know Andy Ruiz stepped in the first Joshua fight on short notice, but it wasn't a week's notice, I'm pretty sure. And, I mean, at that time, Andy Ruiz obviously wasn't as well known, but obviously now he's known as the man who beat Joshua. You know, that's really his big trademark from sort of casual fans. But yeah, I mean, that delves into how this fight was made. I mean, Helenius came into this fight, obviously, he was in good shape. He said he had a good camp going into his other fight. And I watched his other fight. He looked pretty solid. It seemed like he knew that his opponent in there wasn't that, I guess you could say, higher level. Because, I mean, he was just able to sort of play with him in there. I mean, he wasn't going too hard for the first 2 rounds, landing some decent shots. Then in the third round, he started to pick it up. Helenius landed 1 big shot on Miolonen, stopped him in 3. But yeah, that fight was in Finland between 2 Finnish fighters in a castle as well. So, I mean, yeah, and I believe I was watching the press comments yesterday, and it did say, or Eddie Hearn did say that Helenius he got a call from Helenius' team that he's fighting in a few hours and that they want this Joshua fight after they knock out Miolonen, who was their initial opponent on Saturday. And that's what happened. And I guess their team negotiated well, got the job done, and now they're making this fight happen. So just to get into both ways that either of these men could win, I'm just going to first start out with the A side, and that's Anthony Joshua. So Joshua recently, with his new trainer, Derek James, has been fighting a bit more defensive, a bit more with sort of counterpunching in mind as opposed to going forward brute with power like he was used to some years ago. But, I mean, in this fight, I don't think Joshua was going to overlook Helenius at all. He was talking about that even at the press conference. He was like, Helenius is a guy that you just can't overlook. He could surprise you, and that's what happened with Helenius against Kovnatsky. And, yeah, I mean, Anthony Joshua, he's also sparred with Robert Helenius, and it was, I believe, in 2017, 2018, maybe even 2019 they sparred. But, I mean, I've heard Helenius in some articles and some interviews, he said they've sparred up to maybe even close to 80 rounds together. So, I mean, they definitely know each other well, but Joshua, he's changed so much since like 2018, 2017. So I wonder if Helenius is going to be able to adapt to that as opposed to thinking of the style in his head that he's used to sparring with Joshua. So, yeah, back to Joshua's game plan to win this fight. I think that if he's going to get the job done, I mean, Helenius, when he fought Wilder, he did come forward and was doing very well for the first round, and then he got caught with one punch when he left himself open going for a body shot. I mean, if I was Helenius and I had a very good round like that, there was just a few seconds left, which really sucked for Helenius because, I mean, he tried to go in with one more body shot just to steal the round, and then Wilder, with his one-punch power, slept him. But, I mean, if that punch didn't land, I mean, who knows? He could have won that first round and could have went on and just kept pressing Wilder because Wilder was getting hit to the body decently by Helenius, and it was a good start for Helenius. But obviously he got caught. So, I mean, for Anthony Joshua here, I mean, it could be tough to say what he needs to do in this fight because I feel like if he takes it slow, he's going to get compared to Deontay Wilder's performance against Helenius. He's going to get kind of ragged on. I mean, really, Helenius throughout his career, when he did lose, obviously the Wilder fight was just one punch. The Washington fight was very close while it lasted. Against Dillian White, it wasn't that bad. But against Johan Duhaupas was just landing big shots, sort of going forward a bit when he'd land his big power shots. I mean, but for Joshua, I think he's going to stick to Derek James' game plan in this fight, and I think his best way of victory is probably countering on the outside, trying to lure Helenius in. If Helenius does go forward, and he'll try and just land big counter punches and try and hurt him. And if he does hurt him, he'll probably go forward. And if he has a number of success, he'll probably go forward. But I think his best bet in this fight is to probably try and counter Helenius. I do think Joshua has some speed on Helenius and some power, I would say. But Helenius does hit very hard and is definitely very tough. But Anthony Joshua, I think his best bet to win this fight would probably be countering Helenius on the outside. But if I were to put any type of prediction in for this fight, I'd say that this fight doesn't go the distance, definitely, because I think either way, I see either Joshua stopping Helenius or I see Helenius stopping Joshua. So yeah, once again, for Joshua's game plan to win this fight, I think that he's going to have to sort of be a little bit tentative in the earlier rounds. I think he's going to have to fight in the outside a bit, land big counter rights like he was doing against Jermaine Franklin. And Jermaine Franklin has a very, very good chin, was eating those shots from Joshua. But, I mean, who knows? If Joshua was able to land a good shot on Helenius, it could hurt him or could put him out. So, I mean, for Joshua, he's definitely going to have to stick to his coach's game plan because Derek James has been making Joshua fight a bit more on the defensive, a bit more with sort of counter-punching in his mind as opposed to being the aggressor. So I think that he's going to do that even in this fight, even though he's a pretty sizable favorite over Helenius. But in terms of Helenius' game plan in this fight, if he's going to win, I think he's going to have to be a bit more cautious than he was against Deontay Wilder because both Wilder and Joshua hit very hard, and he learned the hard way again in that Wilder fight, just going forward, trying to put pressure. I mean, for Joshua, the problem is recently when he's been getting pressed in his fights, he's been a bit more uncomfortable. So I think maybe early, just to avoid any type of like flash knockout, just one punch, one and done, I think that Helenius should be a bit more cautious in like the first 3-4 rounds, maybe trying to land big, long straights. I think Helenius' best combination is his 2-1, jumping in with a straight right, then finishing up with an up jab. I think that's his best combination. He dropped Adam Kovnatsky with that combination and hurt him in the second fight multiple times with that as well. So I think that for him, that's going to be his best bet. He's going to have to go earlier, fight at mid-range a bit, try and gauge distance. The earlier rounds might be boring if he fights that way, but I think for his best interest, that's the way he's going to have to do it. And I think that once maybe rounds 4, 5, and 6, if it goes that long, I think he's going to have to start pressing Joshua. And obviously Joshua, his punch resistance has looked a bit more shaky recently since that first Ruiz fight. So, I mean, if Joshua is able to get hit with a big shot from Helenius, one of those big straight rights, who knows? He could get hurt. And I think that's Helenius' best bet. He's got to land one big punch on Anthony Joshua, because obviously he's a pretty big underdog in this fight. I believe he's 6 years older than Joshua as well. He's 39. He's 39. Joshua's 33, I believe so. So, I mean, yeah, he's going to have to take the earlier rounds a bit more cautiously than the Wilder fight. And then maybe as he starts to ease into the fight, he's going to have to start to land big shots going forward a bit, start to press Joshua, and start to really get his head out of line. Because Helenius, obviously, he's a big guy, and some of these big heavyweights don't have great head movement. Obviously, the guys who are like 6'5" and above, it's pretty tough for them because they're much, much taller, much, much larger to move around. So, for Helenius, I think instead of like when he fought Wilder, he'd go in for a body shot and leave his face wide open. That's why Wilder capitalized on that opportunity. So for him, he's definitely going to have to be much tighter in his defense and his guard when going forward. But I think he should definitely go forward and press Joshua a bit, throwing big shots after a few rounds of finding openings and finding opportunities to land. But I think that's Helenius' best bet. He's got to fight slow early on the outside a bit, and then sort of go forward as the rounds go on and try and press Joshua and make him uncomfortable, and ultimately possibly getting the stoppage. And obviously, as for Anthony Joshua, like I said before, I think he's just going to have to try and find the right punch. Because I feel like with his power, if he's able to land with good leverage, good snap on it, I think he definitely put almost anyone out of there in the heavyweight division. So I think Joshua, if he's able to land some nice big counters on Helenius, that'll probably be his best bet to win. I mean, if he wants to win this fight in Wilder fashion, trying to get a first-round knockout, I mean, he could go forward, but, I mean, who knows? He could get caught with a big punch. So for him, he's going to try, I think he should just take it slow, just try and find the right punch, find the right counter, and just try and outbox Helenius with the jab a bit, throw big right hands. But for like I said before, he could definitely go forward. But in the end, overall, I think for both fighters' game plans in this fight and how this fight could either way end, I think it will most likely end by stoppage. And I think that Joshua should definitely look for those counters, and I think that Helenius should fight slowly early and then ease into the fight and go forward. So yeah, that's really it. I'm MB Boxing. Thanks for watching my preview on Joshua versus Helenius. Take a look at some of my other predictions, hit the like button, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys later.